Bojo, Salgoski Indigenous Cause, Makwanedo Dem, Wasaksing Bonjaba. So I've introduced myself by my spirit name, my clan, and where I come from. I'm from the community of Wasaksing, and my clan is Bear Clan, and my spirit name is Zahgaugai, which means a sun ray. What happened when I was young, my father's mother, my grandmother, had a vision about my spirit name. And what she saw in her vision, she saw a ray of sunlight going across the sky before the sun came up. So that's what she said. In that vision, she saw me. Sun ray is what she says. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, that the ray of sunlight goes across the sky before the sun comes up, because that's come to have meaning for me in terms of my identity. But the spirit name or the Anishinaabe name or the name that comes from your nation is your name. And we've had those names for the longest time. Eh? You were born into a nation and your name from the language of that nation. That was just the way it was. Eh? You didn't have to do anything to earn that. Eh? You weren't left alone for a few years having to earn the right in your nation to have your name. Very often you are named very close to birth. It's like your birthright. So nowadays you might hear that, you might hear people, because we grew up, because of the churches and the governments, they forbid us from practicing our culture. So many of us don't have our spirit names. Sometimes you might hear someone say that you have to earn your spirit name. You remember before Europeans came, you were born right into our culture. See? So you're born and you were given your name as soon as possible. You didn't have to earn it. So there's a misconception nowadays that people say you have to earn your name. And that's not quite, well, that's not true at all. You were born into this place and you were in your nation's language, you had a name almost immediately. So for Anishinaabe, the way we understand it is that what happens to us before we come here, we sit and we talk to the Creator. We have a conversation about life. We talk about many things, how long we're going to live. We get to choose our mother. Choosing our mother, we know who her helper is, who your father is. Someone comes along and picks us to protect us, our spirit helper, or what English call a guardian angel. There are many things that happen even before we're born that add to our identity. But in this conversation with the Creator, you become full of knowledge. You become satisfied. You know everything. So you say that to the Creator. Okay, I'm ready to go there now. I know everything. Is what you say. So you stand up to leave the Creator. That's when you receive your spirit name. Because in Anishinaabe, Gitche Manado means great mystery. And you, in the spirit, is a Manado, which is a mystery. So once you have knowledge, you're prepared to come to this place, you stand up, you have Manado Noswin, a spirit name. Your spirit carries a name now. So for me, even though as a young man, when my grandmother had the vision for my name, I had my name even before I was born. When I stood up to leave the Creator, that was when I became Zahgaugai. So what happens though in life when you come here, eh, if you're lucky, someone dreamed about you not too long after birth, and that person talked to your parents, and they came to an understanding that that one knew your spirit name. So then there'd be a feast about your name. They say back in the day it would take maybe 7 to 10 days. Someone would see your name, they would announce it to creation. So this whole place would know your spirit name. They would know how you fit into this place by your name, where it fits in. Maybe you have an animal name, like makwa, like bear. Maybe you have a medicine name like ishkonda, cedar. Or maybe you have a water name, Nibi, water, or sky name, Ishik. So anyway, whatever name you have, it would be your relationship to this creation. And you would belong to have a good sense of how you fit into this world. So here your spirit name, like we said, it comes even before you're born. Although other nations have other ways of doing it too, we do acknowledge too in Anishinaabe. You could carry the name of an ancestor, right? Back before, because we didn't grow up practicing our culture too, where I come from, the church and the government, wouldn't allow it for the longest time. And after 1969, when the Indian agents were no longer around these parts, the culture slowly came back bit by bit. So that's what happened. People started wanting to know what at that time they called their Indian names. So when I was young, I didn't know the process of getting a spirit name till I was older than my grandmother. When I was a young man, like I said, I gave my grandmother tobacco and she had the vision for my name. But before I had that name, I was told I could use my father's name. My father's name was Anja Benesi, or Changing Thunder. I was told I could use his name. So you might hear that too. Sometimes someone's name is the name of an ancestor, that you can use that name for your identity. So we had various ways of finding names. Now, you could do something so significant in your life, something so meritorious that you would receive a name, you'd receive another name. Okay? You'd have a name based upon some achievement. So there were various facets of having names: the spirit name, a name of an ancestor, and named after something you had done. And sometimes, if you've struggled for a long time with something, let's say this modern time you struggle with addictions, when you take control of that addictions and you no longer have it, you can live a life free from that. That's such an achievement. Okay? They say that you might receive a name at that time to honor the healing that you've done. We even say that too sometimes. A naming ceremony is a healing ceremony. Sometimes they have another name, a new name, heals you from anything that went on with your last name. You move forward into a new name. So these names were done in that way. Okay? So that really confused the Indian agents when they come in. The government, when they came, they brought treaty payments. They didn't like the idea that we would use one or more names. That's where they came into that, giving us a name. So there were two reasons. One, they didn't like the idea that we had more than one name, so they wanted us just to have one name. They usually picked an English name. And depending on the church's influence in your community, I remember Protestant children just had two names, a first name and a middle name. Catholic children had four names. They had to have a good Christian name as well, the other two. So those were things that were enforced upon us, that kind of naming. And then even an even sillier thing that happened. If the officials that came from the Queen or from the government couldn't pronounce our names, they would just say, I can't say that. So your last name is Jack. And they pick a name out of the air. So that's why we have people, snobby people who have names like that. John, Jack. They have just really simple names because the government person couldn't pronounce the real name and the snobby name. So that's what happened to us. But what we have now is your spirit name. Talk a little more about that. In your conversation with the Creator before you came here, like I said, your Manado has a noswit, a spirit name now. So we're born with that. And what would happen in your lifetime, you would bump into someone who can find names. Maybe you would know a name finder. You would speak with them. You would have a consultation with them about you wanting to know what your spirit name is. And then after that consultation, you'd go back with tobacco and ask them to look for that for you. And however they do that, whatever it means, some people dream, some people fast, some people sweat. Each name finder does it individualist to themselves, but they'll go into the spirit world and look for your name. And when they find your name, they'll come back and let you know they have it. And then they make arrangements to announce your name to creation. And those ceremonies can take different forms. They can be extravagant or they can be simple. The most simple one is that your name gets announced to the four directions. And if you do it with people, people in your naming ceremony will say your name back to you. They represent creation repeating your name to you. So you hear creation saying it back to you. So your spirit name is your identity. For my name, Zahgaugai, a ray goes across the sky before the sun comes up. That speaks to some of what I do. I'm really curious. So I've done things before other people have done it. I'm always going out ahead, finding out things. That's in my name. And also what I do, I didn't do it by choice, but I came into what they call suicide intervention because I can listen to the dark stories and not be judgmental or be upset. So that my name, the sun ray goes ahead of the sun into the darkness. I can listen to those stories and help people find sunshine or find life. So your name, when you meditate on your name, it will have an association to your purpose here on this earth. So that's how strong that identity is. If you meditate on what your name is, you'll find your purpose in that name because everything about that name is a purpose. Because when you sat with the Creator, that was why you're coming here. You're coming here to fulfill a purpose. So like I said, now the spirit name, someone will look for it in a spiritual way. But then again, you might be named after someone, some family or some person that's significant. You could be given that name and carry it. Again, you could have a name based upon something achieved, some great achievement, and you could also have a name that's based upon, some healing, some great thing you've overcome. Oh, yeah, I forgot that there's another way to have names too. If you don't know your spirit name, but you look after the fire, then you're called Shkwede, Nene, firekeeper, eh? If you don't know your spirit name and you carry the water, you're known as the Bikwe, the water woman. Eh? So the role you have in your life could be your name too. If you're a teacher, eh? Kinamao Kwe, eh? Teacher woman. Kinamao Nene, eh? Knowledge man. So those things that you do in your life, that's what you're called, and that's your name, your function. So even without knowing your spirit name, you would still have a name. So we don't go around in our culture nameless, saying there's always something that we're named. That's why in Ojibwe they say Anishesh Nakazian. What are you called? So people will call you how they see you. It's fortunate if they know your spirit name, they can call you that. It's also fortunate that you have an idea of where you go. So what happens now, that's our names now. Many of us grew up with English names, eh? So it's a struggle for us to know who can find names or even who to listen to have names. So we can have a name from a different nation too. Eh? My name Zahgaugai is from my nation, but I was in a healing ceremony named Wapiska Maingan Kanimadut, and that's Cree for the albino wolf dancing because my healer, she was Cree. So I have an Anishinaabe name and a Cree name, and that can happen. Sometimes maybe you live in Anishinaabe territory and you're Haudenosaunee, which you need to know your identity. You can go to Anishinaabe and they'll find your name in Anishinaabe. And then through your research, you can go back to Haudenosaunee and find it, how it's either translated or whether it fits that way. So either way that you have your identity. So when we talk about your identity, we have our lines through your parents. It's called blood lineage. You have your mother's line. That's why we say that in matriarchy, our line flows through our mother, but our clan flows through our father. But those are the lineage. That's the blood lineage in us. Those are our ancestors, our biological ancestors. So that's the lineage we have. Everything our biological ancestors knew, they passed on to us. And we, in turn, become the transmitters of that knowledge. We send that knowledge into the future to our children and our grandchildren, on down 7 generations. That's what we say. So what happens to us now too? There's what's called a spirit lineage. Okay? Someone who feels so close to you, they're like your brother. Right? If they felt like your brother, you would adopt them as your brother. Adoption ceremony. You would adopt that person. They would, for all intents and purposes, be your brother. You would share, resources. He'd be your brother. He could come and stay at your house. He could live with you if he needed to. But for all intents and purposes, they'd be that. We did that with children too. We adopted children. We adopted, even aunties and uncles. We even adopted grandparents. If they felt like our grandparent, we adopted that. So that was like a spirit lineage, someone who felt so close to us, we would adopt them. And that was real. That was real. They became really that relationship to us, that relative. So that's the way it would be. And what happens within the adoption, once you adopt someone into your line, then that's true. And because it's a spiritual thing. So if that person did something so outrageous towards you, you wouldn't remove that from them. Okay? But that would be maybe eventually if they weren't behaving in a good way, that they wouldn't change. They would just be ostracized, maybe asked to leave the village. But they would be who they were. They would have their identity. You wouldn't strip them of that because you don't take back what the spirit puts into place. It's what we do, and that's our understanding. That's the way we are. We don't undo what the spirit does. But your identity and your name again, we say that when you hear your name and you know the name from your language and from your people, we say once you know that, you have clarity. You know exactly who you are. And one of the things we encourage people to do nowadays, if that's all you know in your language is your name, and then use it because you're making the newcomer say your name in our language, okay? Which undoes that what he did to us, when he told us he couldn't pronounce our name, so he made up a name for us. That undoes that. So it's a good idea when you have your spirit name to say it all the time and make everybody say it. That way, you're making everybody say to you your name in your language. And that's a powerful thing. Even if that's all you do, that's a great movement to reclaim our languages. So we use that in that way too. So, like I said, now, once you know your spirit name, you can meditate on that because within that is your life purpose. You talk to the Creator about coming here. And when you still believe the Creator, the name that attached to you reflects that conversation you had with the Creator. So that's how we look at ourselves. That's our ultimate identity. It's our spirit identity. So again, like I said, there's nothing you need to do to earn that. You have that. You're born into that culture. You're born into that name. So that's a little bit about your identity and your naming for now. So we say, like to say, Miigwech you for listening to me.